Hello, everyone. I am joined right now by Waylon Rosell, Riot Magus, over at Riot Games. Well, not at Riot Games today. He's in his home with his strategy behind him. Of course, we've got this coverage brought to you by Alienware, so thank you so much to them as I make sure that their logo is playing on the screen. There we go. We'll put it there. Waylon, how you doing?
Doing great. Just the last 10 days have been a whirlwind, but given the circumstances of, it does, it's not great to be able to not be able to go out and interact and be with others. But, considering the circumstances, it's been just so amazing to see the reception around Valorant and it just like there's just a jolt of energy that I think a lot of people on the team needed to like keep pushing, and delivering for everyone who's hyped about the game.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you say it's been 10 days, and for me, it feels like it's been a month. So much has happened, and so much streaming, and so much conversation about the game. For those of that don't know that are watching this, maybe they didn't follow League or they're not interested in it. You've actually spearheaded much of the initial League of Legends esports stuff and ran it for quite some time, correct?
Yeah, I guess the equivalent of like an old timer at Riot Games. I've been around for about 8 years now. The first seven were spent on League of Legends, developing like the tournaments like Worlds and MSI and All Stars, launching LCS, franchising, doing a lot of different things. And so about a year ago, a little bit less than a year ago, was really excited to pivot and think about some of our new titles coming out, and couldn't possibly be more excited to think about the future of what Valorant could be.
Yeah. And doing many interviews with me and
Of
dealing
course,
with much of my frustrations and complaints and
yeah,
public,
and learning
tweets.
Rays. Those are the
Yes, and
things that
learning
I have
race.
to
Yes,
do. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. Well, either way, I just wanted to get an idea for, you said about a year ago you stepped away from the league side. Obviously, I've seen your name attached to some of the TFT stuff as well, but I mean, has it been like a year of coming up with esports strategy for Valorant? I would say that would be somewhat surprising to me, given that you guys posted an article that's like, we're not doing anything esportsy anytime soon.
Oh, Travis, that's a unfair distillation, I think, of what was up there. It's been less than a year, been about 9 months, but a lot of it was actually integrating the esports efforts into the game team. I mean, we're really trying to present a unified Valorant experience to players, and so I think a lot of that is just learning how to integrate our systems and work together. A lot of it's been hiring. So, hiring folks to the team, trying to build a team, not just from people who have worked on, Riot Esports, but also, coming from a variety, diverse set of backgrounds so that we can get different perspectives as we try to build something new. And so I think that when it comes down to like, really core strategic planning, a lot of that was done over the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Oh, and I had a kid during that time too. So,
Okay, that's
that was,
fair.
that
Yeah.
was,
Well,
that
that
was
might
that.
discount you some time.
Yeah.
I mean, one of because you mentioned that some of it is literally just working with like the Valorant team itself. I feel as though one of the issues that League has faced as an esport in the past was just the fact that there was a pretty big division between and separation between like the development team and the esports team in terms of like, hey, how can we prioritize this like esports feature for League whenever like the devs are working on something else or whatever. That's what it seemed like from the outside, at least. And certainly there's just the idea that while League perhaps always had the dream of being an esport whenever it was made, like we were at a very different place when League of Legends came out, right? So I'm kind of curious, do you see any differences and at being a part of it in the way you guys are approaching esports literally within the game and the product itself?
I think you said it best in that we didn't even really know what esports was back then, at least given where we sit today. The wealth of experience that Riot as a company has gotten, and not just people who have been on the Valorant dev team, they've seen a lot of this along the way. But there are actually a lot of people on the Valorant dev team, Anna herself, who have been on the League of Legends team, and they've seen what are the ways that an esport and a game team can work well together, and what are the things getting in the way. I think it's improved dramatically for League of Legends, actually, for what it's worth. I think like maybe the first 3 years where everyone's just like holding on to the League of Legends ship as it's like growing and expanding around the globe. I think there were different priorities then, but I think when it comes to Valorant, like this is at its core, right? it's a really competitive game. It's a game made by, as you can see, devs who come from a competitive background, and they have a lot of experience and interest in esports. And so I think there's this commitment to knowing that we don't know exactly what it's going to look like necessarily, but we know it's going to be a game that really touches on all facets of what make, I think, a great esport. And so that's one of the reasons why we've tried to engage early on to establish that working relationship, so that whether it's developing, an observer features or spectating features that's needed for the game, or a variety of other potential things, we're sort of viewed as one team. And I think that I really want to compliment Anna, Joe, and the whole team for just actually embracing this idea, and it gives us a lot of hope for what we can do in the future.
Yeah. Well, I know that, what was it, 2 or 3 days ago, I think it was, you had a post that went up on the Valorant website, sort of talking about outlining your vision and some of the guidelines for folks that want to do esports stuff. Right. I don't know if you want to give like a very high level view of that, just in case anybody missed that blog.
Yeah, you can go to playvalorant.com to get the gist of it. But at a high level, it sort of was meant to be just sharing our guiding principles for how we want to approach building this as an esport. And look, I think for a lot of people, especially people who are adding me on Twitter, like, we understand that the game is still in closed beta, right? Like, but there's a lot of energy, excitement, and it's been a very commonly asked question. And on top of that, we're really being inundated with a lot of positive interest in getting involved in the scene. So we felt like it was important just to establish a directional vision for where we're going to start building Valorant Esports. And that's through competitive integrity, authenticity, and accessibility as the 3 core pillars, and then we released the community guidelines for any people who's interested in participating in the ecosystem and how they can get involved. So that was sort of at a high level of what we were trying to talk about, but I'm sure you're going to get into a few of those questions. I just encourage anyone to go read it, because it's a hefty letter, and so I think they're better off reading it for themselves. Sure.
Well, kind of diving into some of the stuff that was discussed in the letter, but maybe we can expand on. I think one of the interesting things that I have seen is, 100 Thieves, I think within the first week had a tournament. Twitch Rivals had something. Like, to your point, there's already so much tremendous interest in the game as an esport. How are you determining sort of the partners that you guys can work with on this stuff? And for like 100 Thieves thing, is that a situation where they're approaching you guys, and how are you kind of filtering through, I'm sure globally, just the huge list of people that are all approaching you to try and do stuff like this?
I think one of the things I think is correct. We're sort of getting a lot of inbounds, and we're doing our best just to really enable people who want to get involved and started in Valorant to help them to do so. So right now we're sort of like, we view ourselves as our role as custodians, or like stewards, to ensure that, for example, 4 tournament organizers don't throw an event on the same day at the same time. Right. And that was actually, when we got our initial wave of proposals in, that was actually a real thing that was proposed. And so we're trying to go, okay, cool, look, how can everyone have like a separate day, or at least a separate time slot where they can go, so that, fans ultimately don't have to choose between watching a favorite streamer play in one event or another event, or like their competitive team. And so we're really just trying to do our best to enable and unlock that participation. When it comes down to it, we're just like sort of saying yes and trying to let people get it, like invest, because a lot of it is like really trying to harness the energy around the closed beta launch. There have been like fewer but still interest in trying to like establish these long-term, like larger structures, and I think those are just going to require a lot deeper talks of trying to understand what our partners are trying to achieve, making sure that it can work within kind of the frameworks that we're setting up. And again, our goal is for Valorant fans, we want them to have a lot of content, and we think that the interest has been, again, humbling. We expected there to be interest, but it's been a little bit more than we expected.
Well, I'm glad you kind of mentioned, you said there's partners that are, or potential partners at least, that are reaching out to you and curious about doing these like larger structures. I'm curious, do you foresee a world where this year there will be major Valorant tournaments with some of these bigger prize pools? Because you kind of outlined in your guidelines like a 3-tier system where there's kind of community, these mid-tier, and then these like really big events. Do you foresee mid-tier events happening this year, maybe even soon? And should we expect even a big event or more than one at some point in time this year, even if those things are happening more digitally than physically, given the state of the world?
Right, right. I think you called it out. I mean, I think that while I hope that the global situation changes to the point where you can see a more traditional, like, LAN offline event with fans, I think we all would love to. And this, I don't think we appreciate it as much until we weren't able to have it. But the beauty of esports is I do think you'll see competition of all kinds, right? From really small events to potentially, streamer focused events to merit based, competition. We hope to really make sure that there is a sort of an equal amount of everything, and it's not weighted in one direction too much or the other. And I think when the differences between a medium and a major, I think one of the ways that we sort of called that out was like having it really have stakes that play into a greater sort of global story. And whether or not that happens this year or next year, we do hope that we have third parties who are throwing tournaments with stakes, and we intend to be involved, but we know that this is an established genre of certain kinds, right? Like it's not exactly the same game as others out there, but we know there are people with experience in this and having thrown events in games that are kind of adjacent to this, and we think that we could benefit from partnering as we try to figure out what's the best kind of Valorant broadcast experience and esports experience possible.
Yeah, I guess I'm more just trying to get to the idea of how much in 2020 do you guys plan on kind of capping the potential like prize pools or scale of these things? Like, let's say, hey, right now there's like a big rush, I think, for a lot of networks and sports networks that currently can't do broadcast traditional sports.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they might see Valorant as a big opportunity. Like, hey, let's run a 3 week long, 4 week long, $1 million prize pool event with tons and tons of teams. Is that the type of thing that you guys would push back on and say, hey, this is too soon? Or is that something that, we might see this year, or even if it's not even a TV station, maybe it's,
Sure.
a larger third party or something?
I mean, if someone's interested in that, please direct them to us so that we can engage in talks. I mean, ultimately, I think that kind of interest is great. It's not so much about going too big too soon, but it's about too quickly locking in a structure that is hard to unwind. I think that if you break it down, our hope is that the first phase of Valorant Esports at least will very much be tournament driven. We'll have high stakes matches. We'll have a variety of different broadcasters or tournament organizers trying to really approach it and showcase Valorant in their own way. We think that will ultimately again lead to, it's almost like a collective problem solving effort of like what's the best way that we can sort of portray Valorant and do Valorant esports. And so we think that we're very open to that kind of proposal. And it's just, again, it's so early. A lot of these proposals, if they are coming to us, they've just hit our inbox. We've just started talking about it. And we'd like to at least sort of take a moment, get a lay of the land, understand who's actually interested, and it not be sort of a first come, first served opportunity. And so, yeah, I mean, the goal I think is not so much to cap as just make sure we curate and it's not like overstacking in any one way or the other. I think ultimately, if you think of it from a fan perspective, it'd be more beneficial to have events happening throughout the year than all clustered in 1 month, for example.
One of the interesting responses and takes that I saw in response specifically to the blog post that you guys put out was just like, oh, this is another situation where a publisher is willing to let third parties take the risk and do the work of building something until the esport gets to the scale in which the publisher is ready to step in and sort of own everything themselves without having to take any of the risk. I mean, is there a world where something like that ends up happening, where you guys lean heavily on third parties until 2021 or 2022, when you guys are interested in creating something that's more similar to the LCS?
I think that there are no plans right now, and look, plans change. I think that it's the only thing that we can say is that we don't know what kind of long-term structure we're going to engage into, and it may look like the LCS, it may not. I think that the challenge is that there's a lot of interest. So to address your question, right, like our hope is that for someone who wants to invest in Valorant, they want to invest in Valorant long term, and we want to be good to our partners. And so it's not really in our interest either to encourage a bunch of investment and then like whoops, like later on, like I've actually had to live this, right? When we did the LCS, we have had partners who had invested in League of Legends, and it was really challenging. And so what we're really hoping to do is just like be super forthright with as much information as we can talking to these partners. We actually, have spent the last month or so, you just having, side conversations with teams and orgs and sponsors that we work with, just giving them a rundown of almost like a distillation of what we shared with players just now, because we want them to be excited, certainly, but we want them to understand that this is going to be an evolving ecosystem. This is going to be something that changes. We don't know where it's going truly, but we think that anyone who does invest, who chooses to invest, probably will see benefit, right? Like I think getting involved at the ground floor of a new game like Valorant, knock on wood, hopefully it's successful after its launch, can lead to a lot of benefit for anyone who gets in. And so we just want to be really honest and open with our partners who choose to invest, and we hope that they do, but we'd rather, again, just make sure we're just open with them. And if they're still interested in investing, our goal is to figure out like what is a structure that could work for them that benefits their business, maybe on like the time frame that we have any inkling of, which is like, if you ask me, I couldn't tell you what's happening in 22. Certainly 2021, we know we want tournaments. Like that's so that we're just trying to be as open as possible with the partners who invest, because I think that it's not good for anyone when there is large structural change and people feel left out.
Well, unlike League, where you guys didn't really have any existing esports partners, you now do, right? All over the world, different teams, sponsors, etc., that are attached to the the company through League. Do you anticipate giving any kind of like privileges or access, early access, any type of things to these existing partners? Will you favor them in some way over folks that haven't had any partnership with the company before?
No plans to explicitly favor, especially teams or, in the competitive integrity point that we shared in the letter is really important, right? Like, we certainly did meet with the partner teams that we have. We also met with teams that we don't have an existing relationship with, but have a prior history operating in the space where Valorant is playing. And so, our goal really is to create a world where there are new people who want to form a relationship with Riot who haven't before. But we also want to be good partners to the existing teams that we have. So we feel like we're just trying to sort of treat everyone equally and fairly. That's one of the also the reasons why we tried to give access, for example, to all team organizations at the same time, where we tried to make sure that no one was sort of left out in understanding what our goals were before communicating those publicly. It's just our hope is just to try to be as fair as we can, and we think that's a good path forward.
One of the unfortunate things for me as a North American interviewer is that in League there's not necessarily the greatest regional parity, and it has gotten better over time. It has gotten better with time, and unfortunately, I don't know if we're going to be able to see Cloud9 compete anytime soon. But I am kind of curious, as you are in the primordial soup of Valorant as an esport, are you sort of reflecting on League and looking at ways in which you can perhaps make sure that all the regions are leveling up equally, or how you can kind of balance around some of that stuff?
Certainly, and that's actually been something that various teams in various regions have expressed. One of the things we did is we just tried to go out and ask questions and learn, to be like, hey, what are your experiences, whether it's in League of Legends or in other games, your challenges, opportunities you see. And one of them was, hey, the region locking, which has led to good sort of identities for our leagues in League of Legends. Geez, say that quickly. Has led to good like regional identity, has sometimes had the perception of holding back competitive teams. And look, living in Los Angeles, I have seen a long history of North American teams at Worlds, and I get it. I think that it's just so early. I think you said it best. The primordial soup days is probably the best way to describe it. We're conscious of it, but we don't really know what a region means. And I think that's like, I don't know if that'll surprise people, but we're like going into this without having any preconceived definitions of what is a region. We really are trying to come at Valorant with an open mindset and trying to not sort of copy and paste, whether it's the structure and setup of League of Legends or even the regional definition of League of Legends. There are pros and cons to all this, but we were really trying to stay a little bit more open as we have the luxury right now of being open, and understanding that as the game launches, right, as tournaments begin spinning up, there'll be more and more of a need for us to define these things so that it lets teams and pros operate with confidence.
Well, I know we're kind of running low on time, but I do want to ask you, because you're sitting so close with the devs and talking so much with them and have been for a while, unlike in League, one thing that I've noticed is that, with FPS, there's just so many of them, and actually so much of the existing FPS ecosystems involve like microtransactions, and either in terms of content creator share codes or in terms of team skins or whatever. That has been somewhat limited in League in terms of, like you see the world champions get it, for instance. But do you foresee, or are you guys already planning on, how can you involve that kind of like rev share and in-game itemization with third parties?
We certainly talked about it at a high level. Again, I think that, as we want the game team to be aware of things, just given how early on we don't think that that's like a priority must solve prior to launch item. But at the end of the day, it's important that the team's aware of it. They've embraced it. Again, like the game team is more behind this as an esport than I could ever have dreamed. And I think that, the question we're really asking ourselves is how can we bridge the gap between play and watch, which is inclusive of having the chance to support your team inside the game and outside the game, right? But also, how can we have it so that when you're watching the game, you benefit from watching and playing at the same time. I think that oftentimes, esports, especially early on, can really help if we have this cycle, right, where like, by playing the game, we help say, hey, like there's this thing as an esport, go check it out. It could lead to growth of the sport really well, and having a flourishing esport can help, like keep the game relevant and growing long term. And so that's a really big priority for us. And I hope it'll manifest in a way that is, again, really good to our partners, whether they're sponsors or whether they're teams or pros. Like I think that that's always the aspiration. We're trying to brainstorm ways to make it so that it's sort of like a win-win proposition, and it's not like you get to make like this really cool skin, or you get to make this other skin that might like be good for the sport but might not be as cool for players who want to buy it. And so we're trying to figure out ways that we could potentially just like change the game up a little bit. More to come there. There's just a lot of development and tech that needs to go into it. But like certainly top of mind. And I think in order to be a great esport, we have to be supportive of our partners in the ecosystem is the best way to do it. And so however we intend to support it, like that's something that, we know we have to nail.
Last question actually comes from Mark Merrill, because I had a game with him and Doublelift earlier today, and I said I was going to be interviewing him, and I said any questions for him, and he wanted to know what the difference has been like working on Valorant as an esport over League.
It's the Mark. I love it. So really, I think the most refreshing thing is coming in with this blank slate and a whole lot more knowledge, right? Like we've done a lot of good on League. We've made a lot of mistakes, right? And like I'll own both of them in the past. And so we just come in like almost like these like weathered veterans who have built this sport up and poured our blood, sweat, and tears into it. And there's this chance that I never thought I'd get again, which is this chance to work on building an esport around a game that has the potential to really make an impact on gaming as a whole. And so like that infusion of energy, but like comboed with a little bit of weathered wisdom, it's just like it's magical. And I'm just like, again, like I think I wrote in the letter, like super humbled and grateful to get a chance to try to at the end of the day, it's going to take more than just me to do it, right? It's the esport team, it's the game dev team, it's all the people in the community that are going to have to do it. But I'm super privileged to get the chance to do that and to play a small part in it. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to describe, but I'm like really, really grateful, and hopefully people understand that like when people on the Valorant game dev team are like reacting this way, like given the like the past 10 days, it's super genuine, because like we put the game out there going, gosh, I hope people like it, and it's been overwhelming. And so now it's just about living up to all the excitement and all the anticipation, and we're going to do our best.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the interview. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to So seeing you learn Raze, I am terrible at her, but hopefully you can figure her out.
Honestly, I'm a Sage Cypher player. I'm just good at covering my teammates and buying them guns and rezzing them. So like, I don't think Raze is for me actually.
Okay, okay. Well, very good. Well, thanks so much for the interview, and for everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things esports, including Valorant, right here on my YouTube channel. Hello, everyone. This outro is a little different because I want to spotlight this monitor that I just got sent from Alienware that is NVIDIA G-Sync compatible. Thank you so much to them. I'm going to play Valorant on it, and I want to do an unboxing, but I definitely don't have enough time in this outro, so boom, there we go. We got it unboxed. Now I'm running it off of an Alienware notebook with an NVIDIA card in it, so we're getting 144 FPS, but this baby with the right setup can go up to 240. So check it out. You want to play Valorant, play it on this thing. You can go check it out over at alienware.com/Travis. There's a link in the video description below.